Okay, for people joining this live stream, we are talking about the design of a symbolic layer for external storage in Wolfram Language. So, let's see what we've got here. So this is the analog of file write and read. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we try to use the file operations and the cloud operations as a reference to design all these.
Okay. So let's take a look at all of that. Okay, so you're saying this will be the analog of, so in the case of, okay, the difference between write and, okay, so hold on a second. You're saying this is the analog of write. Okay, well, let's actually start with some very basic question, which is what are the clients? What are the services? So, okay, file types.
Right, so we have some services like the usual ones like Dropbox or Google Drive that are meant for regular people like you and me to put the files. But there are other ones like Amazon S3, Google Storage that is used with a structure called buckets. Like our machine learning team uses that for.
Right. Okay. So what does the authentication look like for any of those things?
In the case of Dropbox or Google Drive, so everything is we plan to handle that through Service Connect. So basically, when you and I have a section there for authentication. If you scroll down,
we have a question already on the live stream. Will this work with Azure Blob storage? What is blob storage? Is it a version of buckets?
I'm not sure.
Okay, we should find out. And also being asked about Microsoft OneDrive. Well, yeah, OneDrive is listed here, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not listed here, but we are. Oh no, yeah, IPFS is also there. Yeah.
And we're also being asked about Nextcloud. I don't know what Nextcloud is. I don't see OwnCloud, which presumably we might use. But let me understand something. The thing that is about to ship or has just shipped with the cloud of having notebooks be able to be opened from Google Drive, what is the relationship between that and this?
All right. So what was the question again?
Okay, so we are just shipping now a thing where you can go to Google Drive, and if you find a notebook in Google Drive, you can open it in our cloud.
I see.
Now, who here knows about that? Is Todd here? Does he know about that?
I'm here. I know it exists. I don't know about how it's implemented.
Okay. I mean, Julian is the expert on how that's implemented. So one thing I'd like to flag here is go find out. If Carla, if you could send a message right now to Julian, and that it may be a little late for him, but let's see who would know this stuff. Matt K would probably know this stuff. Okay. And ask them for that information, and if they feel like want to join this meeting, they should join it.
Okay.
Tell us about that. Okay. Okay.
Also, the name external storage, right? Originally was we wanted to have upload and download. We had a discussion we thought about having that as right for now.
Okay, but I'm trying to understand. So the main point here is these are files. Okay, so the way round that this is about is from the language, go and plop data into these external storage system for retrieval. Okay, so that's different from essentially launch from an launch in the GUI, in the notebook GUI. Like for example, if I go to, the whole point is that that we're supposed to be setting it up so that if I go to the file browse here, right? That I could as well be, so I'm in the file browse, I go here, I go, you know, double click here, I'm going to open something. This is, but the whole point is that yeah, there's a little document from the future, but what am I saying? That we're hold on, that as an alternative to this view, you'll be able to go to Google Drive and say open in cloud, right? So that's the other way around. That's for a notebook, the other way around. Here, you might be able to say write a notebook to you know, S3 or something, just as a place to store it, and then retrieve it from its URI or whatever subsequently, right?
Yes. Right.
I mean, presumably, you could use notebook open or something and give an external storage object if that pointed to a notebook. External storage object is essentially like a file. It's like a file expression.
I see.
Or a cloud object.
Everything that everything that is currently like a file could be replaced by, or like a URL, could be replaced by an external storage object. Is that right? Which contains, I don't quite understand this. I mean, what is?
They're not exactly like files, but that, in a sense, that's right, Stephen. It's more like a cloud object, really, in the sense that we have a lot of file operations overloaded to work with cloud objects. We can have those file operations overloaded to work with external storage objects.
But so what is the typical form of the? Okay, here we go. All right. I'm not thrilled. No, I don't like this. No, I don't like this. I mean, that's the main event. It's not a frigging, you know, footnote option. Right. So Carl on our live stream is noticing that this would be useful for neural network training data. Yeah. The reason that we've been using this, we've had a preliminary version of this ourselves for several years. This is an exposure for everybody of what we've already been using, and we've used it. It's what we've done our machine learning stuff with for a while. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, I was saying that one reason it's done this way, alternative is have the service be like the first argument or something, but that's sort of annoying to have to type that every time. I mean, it's kind of like the URL base in the cloud, right? Or the cloud base. There's a notion of the current external storage.
All right. Well, so why don't we call it external storage?
Most of the time, you don't have to use that option.
Right. So, I mean, just like cloud base, why don't we have a thing called external storage base? Why don't we have a dollar external storage base?
We do, or maybe it's called, what's it called?
It's just called service, which doesn't make sense.
No, I mean we have a dollar variable for this, right, guys?
So that wasn't originally designed. We use service because actually we start using method based on our integrated services functions. Since this is an external service, that's what we use as a reference.
But isn't there a dollar variable that holds the current sort of default external storage service?
Not currently, but that's something we were also considering.
Does anybody know if I have a place to put this in my oh, I do, external storage. I already have a folder for this, probably from a long time ago. Oops. Well, I've got a previous round of notes. I assume you've looked at my previous round of notes, whatever may be in there.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. So I think we should do something like this. And this overwrite target, yeah, that's obviously what we need, but which we have from everything. Okay. So this is okay. Dollar external storage base, I guess, on the grounds that you'll only be using one of them. Now, I don't understand why you're using. Is there a current directory for the external storage base? For the external storage, yeah. For the external storage base, is there a current directory?
A current directory, you mean like a default one?
Yes.
No, but the idea is that if you don't provide a directory, we'll create one for you.
Well, that's all well and good for write, but what about for read?
So to read, if you scroll down, you'll see that you need the path to the file, or you need to provide.
Okay, that doesn't make sense. You've got it the wrong way around, because look, it's path/file, right? Don't these services allow you to reference a file as path/file?
Some of them, yes, but you can also provide external storage object that has all the information about the external file.
Okay, but to me, the obvious way to do this would be to say, I mean, there's an you're going to show me an external storage object in a minute here. Okay, that's a good one. Okay. Import external storage object. Okay, but what is the actual structure of an external storage object? Is it only something that's returned? So you don't get to type in, I mean, I don't get to just define a disembodied external storage object.
Right, like create one by yourself? No.
I mean, because in Cloud Object, I can do that, right? If I say Cloud Object of hello, I've got a Cloud Object, right?
Right.
So why wouldn't we do the same thing with external storage object?
It should probably be something more similar to a HTTP request, where you have to build it using different fields to specify the service and the things you're using there.
Okay, but ultimately, I don't understand why the path here is junior to the file name. I mean, isn't the path at least as important as the file name?
I don't know what you mean by that, Stephen. Where is it junior to the file name?
Well, it's way down below here. And okay.
Oh,
look,
in the display. Okay.
There's multiple things I don't like about this. Okay, so in the case of URLs, we get to just give the URL with a URL wrapper, and we just get to give the URL, right? I don't understand why we don't have external storage object be the same way. That is, that you can give the path together with the external storage base, whatever it is, something like this, right? And you could give an authentication there as well, if I'm not
right.
mistaken.
You could provide a service object. What about if the file doesn't exist yet in that service?
Then if you try and do anything with it, it's an error. I mean, it's the same thing with the URL. If I go, import, URL quotes hello, what's going to happen is it's going to say, okay, not found. Even if I say, if I say HTTP, right, it just failed, right? So I think that's what this should do as well. You can define the external storage object. It might just be, have nothing to say. Does that make sense?
But there are some cases like IPFS. So in the case of IPFS, the address you get that identifies the file is one that you only get once you upload the file to IPFS. So you don't know the address beforehand. So how can you?
Then you don't give it here. Then there's nothing to give. You could invent an address, and the address will never, it's a UUID that will never be realized, right? So in other words, you're saying there are systems in which you don't get to specify the address. It simply tells you the address. Just like Cloud Deploy, if you don't give it a file name, simply tells you the address. You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
Right? I don't see a problem with that. I mean, so in other words, you can give an address and it's often, it isn't exactly cyberspace. What is the space? UUID space. It's lost in UUID space. Okay, so let's keep going here. So to my mind, I don't understand why you're breaking apart the path from the file name. I just don't understand that. I mean, these things have, if you ever want to refer to a path without a file name, Well, does that
No,
exist?
they're not breaking apart. That's the target for the download. The file name there is the target for download. You're looking at external storage download, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but I think
No,
it's
I am.
a
No. The file name is part of the external storage object, right?
Yes, the first argument is the external storage object. The second argument is the local path into which you download this file.
No, I'm looking at this one here.
I think Stephen is referring to the blob.
Yeah, I'm referring to this blob here.
On that blob there. Oh, I see. You just don't like how it's displayed with the path.
I don't like the fact that the file name is broken apart from the path. I don't understand that, because I don't see how you ever end up using the file without the path. I mean, like when we have ordinary files on your local file system, or in the cloud for that matter, we do not break apart the quotes file name from the path. See what I'm saying? Now, I'm assuming that there is a root, effectively, in any of these storage systems. There's a root that represents the root of your account somehow. Am I right? Do you understand what I'm asking?
You mean a root folder, like a home folder in?
Yes. Look, okay. I strongly do not believe in breaking these apart. We've not done it. Okay. So let's not do that unless you have an argument otherwise. Am I making sense? Yes.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Don't break them apart. Now, in the case where you just give a file name, what is the default? The default is presumably that you are in the home directory of whatever you authenticated with. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. So in this case, it will be. So I maybe wrote down file name, but it should probably be a full path. But we can also do that. Like if you just provide a file name, we'll just search on the home folder.
Just 1 second. Sorry, say that again. Could you repeat? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I put file name there to differentiate between between files and buckets. But yeah, it should be a full path there. But in case you provide just a file name, we can default to the root folder.
Okay. All right. So how do I get? Okay, let's talk about how you initiate one of these services, because I'm assuming that there is a way here that you could have an authentication option inside the external storage object.
Right. If you scroll down a little bit, there's an authentication section there.
Okay.
Yeah. So we are considering for now 2 types of authentication, assuming in this case, it's not going to be the service option, but in case we use the external storage based option, you can provide just a regular string. And if the service asks you for authentication, it will ask the user to authenticate. If not, you can authenticate using the Service Connect and provide the authenticated service object.
Okay, so hold on. So if the external storage base is like this, right? If I say external storage base equals Service Connect of Dropbox, for example, right? Then that will evaluate to a service object having requested the authentication, correct?
Right, or in case you have the connection saved, you will use that saved connection.
Well, I understand, but Service Connect will use the saved connection, correct?
Right.
Okay, so in this case here, if I say external storage base arrow quotes Dropbox, what's it going to do? Is it then going to, on first use, is it then going to request authentication?
Right. It will create the service connection, and it will run Service Connect.
Okay, on first use.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the idea is if you want to have different, let's say you have 2 Dropbox accounts where you're going to put different files. So you can provide 2 different service objects to 2 different accounts.
Right. So this one, well, what will this do by default if you just give quotes Dropbox, or should you not do that?
Yeah, that should work, and it should open the Dropbox website since this uses.
I understand. No. If you've got 2 different Dropboxes, you've authenticated 2 of them, right? You've got service objects for 2 different Dropbox accounts.
Mm-hmm.
And now you say external storage base arrow Dropbox. Which of your Dropbox accounts does it use?
That will create the 3rd connection. I believe.
See.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. That's a little funky. Okay. So the most common case is you do a service connect to do the authentication. Now, I don't know how this is going to relate to system services, right? The Brad System Services project. Have you guys been following that?
I know about the project, but I'm not following it.
Okay, so that project involves, for example, let's say you have a geo server. You want to say, I want to use this particular geo server. I want to use this particular URL shortener server. Okay, this seems very related to that. And I think you should talk to him about that. Okay. It's also related to things like, which installation of Python are you using in the external evaluate system? But I understand this. That looks pretty reasonable. Okay. Now the authentication. So are you saying, if I say Service Connect, I could put an authentication here explicitly, or I could wait for the web to prompt me. Is that correct? Why doesn't Service Connect work with authentication? Christian, why doesn't it work?
We need to check that.
Okay, fine.
But yeah,
so in principle, though it's horrible practice, but people do it all the time, you can burn in a notebook, you could burn your authentication credentials into the notebook. Actually, the right way to do it, which is beautiful, is to use system credentials, right?
Mm-hmm.
You understand how those work? So that's the system keychain that's coming in 12.1.
Right.
Then you've got a hidden system keychain that's authenticated on your machine. Then you just pass it in your notebook through the system keychain to the authentication of the external service. That should work just fine. Okay.
Right.
All right. Okay, we have a few questions on the live stream here. Can we use S3 services? Yes, the answer is yes. GPU-enabled cloud machine that trains my network, but I want to be able to do most of my work on a local computer. Yes, that is what we've been doing for the last several years. So we think that works because that's exactly what we built this for. Let's see. Somebody wants to. Brian is pointing out that Azure should be supported. Yes, that is certainly our intention, and for reasons not to be discussed yet, that will definitely be supported. Okay, so Ethan is saying, for S3, please support multi-factor authentication. What is the story with that?
We'll have to check, but we are using the SDK provided by Amazon. So if they support that, we should support that as well.
Okay. Please make sure that S3 bucket keys are paged up, loaded, and downloaded in parallel threads. Do you understand what that's about?
Well, about parallel threads, we also have some questions at the end of the notebook related to synchronous tasks.
Okay, fine. All right, we'll get to that in a minute then. Okay, how would this work with NetTrain? So I think in that case, this is one of these cases where, let's see, the AWS link, which actually runs on AWS, right? As opposed to the S3 link, which is this stuff. The AWS link is a different project, right? Where it's actually running computations on AWS, correct?
AWS link is just an exposure of a whole set of AWS APIs, Wolfram Language.
Okay, but I mean, the separate project, which is going to be Jesse and those guys, is actually having, I mean, something we've been doing for a long time is actually being able to run the, Wolfram engine on AWS so that you can have
Right.
an S3 bucket full of machine learning examples and then run the engine on AWS across that S3 bucket, right?
Right. AWS Link is just a tool for that system.
Okay.
It isn't that system.
What do you mean it isn't that system? It's
Well, I mean, AWS Link is the thing that we would use to create that system of, the ability
Okay.
to launch and run.
All right, but that's a subsequent project which we have, green lighted, but is not yet fully active, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, let's go back up here. All right, so I don't completely understand the difference between why is that not upload?
You can blame me for that, and I've already backed off. It's definitely not parallel to the write functions. I was the one who didn't like external storage upload, and it has to be changed. But
well, what are we doing
for?
Wait a minute. What is the analogous thing for? I mean, for remote file systems, right? When you have a remote file, you're just using copy file, aren't you, to do the upload stuff? If you want to upload to a random service somewhere, do we have anything called upload?
Just a data bin upload, I think.
Okay.
But yeah, copy file should work with remote files because it supports SSH and other.
Okay, so what you're saying is that I could do a copy file to an external storage object or from an external storage object. So it is equivalent. Copy file from an external storage object to a local file is equivalent to external storage download. Is that correct?
That should be similar, yes.
Similar, but external storage download works for bucket type objects, whereas copy file would not. Did we decide that, or did we decide that just creates a directory? I guess that creates a directory. So yeah,
is copy file capable of creating a directory? Does copy file create directories?
No, we mean when you work with a bucket and you download it, it will create a directory with the files.
So I guess copy file doesn't work with buckets.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Why doesn't it work with buckets again?
Because at least from the documentation, copy file works with single files. So from file 1 to file 2. In the case of a bucket, we are thinking that external storage download will create a directory with all the files from the bucket there.
Sorry, I spaced for a second because I was watching stuff from the live stream, which is on upload right now. I'm sorry, on download right now from a bucket. Copy file does what?
So copy file works with single files, right?
Okay, but what happens if you copy file a directory? We have a way to copy a directory, don't we? Is it called copy directory?
Yeah.
We have copy directory, yes.
Okay, so copy directory would presumably copy a bucket, or not?
I'm not completely sure if we should call a bucket a directory.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I think that the extension of copy file is going to get a little bit hicky somewhere, because I think it's going to, between authentication and things like this and multiple authentications where it's going to and from, it could get very messy. I mean, you could use a copy file. Well, here's a question. If you want to copy between external storage objects, how do you do that?
Yes, that's another thing we have at the end of the notebook. So we were thinking about having a external storage copy symbol or trying to use something like copy file.
Does copy file work between two remote files? Anybody know?
I think it should work because it supports multiple protocols. for remote stuff.
Okay.
I hope it works between two cloud objects too.
Well, we should check that. Copy file working. So I think that I'm reversing myself here and thinking that would be okay to and presumably delete file will work against an external storage object also. Yes.
Right. Yeah. So we are trying to make.
So why do we have any of these functions? Why do we have any of these? Why do we have external storage put? I mean, the reason we have cloud put is because we have anonymous cloud putting. That's why it's useful to have cloud put. Otherwise, we might as well just say export to the cloud. You see what I'm saying?
Well, we do have anonymous external storage put too.
Do we? Do all these services support anonymous UUID destinations?
Well, IPFS supports that.
I understand that IPFS does. Anything else? Anything else support it?
Well, can't you call external storage put with a lot of these different services with just the expression to put, and it creates its own file name, just some random.
That's my question. Right. That's my question. I mean, IPFS obviously does that, just as the cloud does it. Does S3, for example, create random file names like UUIDs?
Well, in the case of S3, this will not work with S3 because we thought about this working just with the files type services, because it doesn't make sense to put something in a bucket. It's just an expression.
Why not?
Why do you want to use a bucket for storing just one expression?
I mean, I don't understand. If it's just like, why would you use the cloud to store? I mean, why would you use a cloud object to store one expression? You're doing
the ideas of services like S3 is to work with a lot of files, and that's why they have these buckets.
No, I understand that, but what I'm suggesting is that you identify a bucket, then you're running a loop where you're basically throwing 1 million items in there, each one with a UUID. See what I'm saying?
So like a bucket of expressions?
Yes. Yes, written out, presumably, the default, and this is an interesting question, should be in WXF. If you just write an expression, I mean, I don't know, like when you write to the cloud, we're not telling you what's inside the cloud object, right? And it often is WXF, if I'm understanding correctly, at least. So what I'm suggesting is that external storage put would be putting, let's say, I mean, the one argument form of that is just an expa that puts it in the default cloud base as an external storage object containing WXF, so that were you to call that external storage object, were you to say, well, in this particular case, you could actually say get external storage object. You would just get back, just like you would if this was a file, right? The only difference, the only advantage to have an external storage put is that you are, I mean, put itself is a 2-argument function, right? No, it's not. What does it do if you put? What does put do if you just have 1 argument? Oh, creates an empty file. Okay. All right. But
can you handle authentication with get?
With which? External storage put?
No, with get. If you do get of external storage object.
Well, I assume the external storage object contains the authentication.
We could do that, but we haven't discussed about it yet.
Okay. I mean, the get could also have its own authentication option. I mean, we do have a separate cloud get to avoid confusion. Okay. I think it's sort of unnecessary.
Right. I mean, I agree with that. If you've got an external storage object, you can tell all the other functions how to work with that, like get and all that. But so you don't really need external storage get. But it's a nice, just like we have with Cloud Get. It's a convenient thing.
You know what? The correct thing to do here is this: to use put, expa, comma, external storage object open close, because that, like cloud object open close, creates a UUID'd external storage object. That's the right way to do it.
Right.
Not have an external storage put.
But you know, put works the same way with cloud object, and we do have cloud put.
I am aware of that, but that's because we didn't think of this.
I mean, but cloud put, for the put function, they do take a one argument form. It's just the expression. So you say cloud put, it knows to create a cloud object.
Yeah, fair point.
And the get doesn't need that because you have the object.
I know.
It knows it. But I mean, do we keep the get for just a little Pell?
Yeah, we have to keep the get.
You know?
If we're going to have the put, we have to keep the get. I kind of think we should probably have these two functions. Yeah. Okay, so explain to me why upload and download. Why does it download a file? What's the difference? Oh, it's downloading a file. What do we have? We don't have a cloud download, do we? No.
We have a URL download.
Right, but cloud download would be part of the cloud syncing mechanism, right? Because it's taking a file from the cloud and copying it, right?
Right, but I mean, URL download works with a cloud object. So we don't really need cloud download because it doesn't give anything that URL download doesn't already do.
Okay. Well, would the same be true of external storage object? That URL download could do that too? It's not really a URL.
No, it's not a URL. Yeah, it's not a URL.
I mean, it makes it sound like we really should have a function called download that works from the cloud and from anything else. Just like we have get and put.
Yeah.
I mean, I tend to feel that what we should do is have experimental functions which are external storage download, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's conceivable that we'll package everything together and simply overload default, generic functions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, upload a list of files to an external storage thing, or a directory, presumably. External storage upload should upload a directory to the external storage device service.
Yep.
Okay. Sander is saying, do we really want an import, a download, a get? He's asking about get, import, download. Those all do different things. I mean, get reads in Wolfram Language code, import reads in whatever it reads in, download is copying the file from there to here.
Right, but we don't have an external storage download. I mean, external storage import, right? I mean, we've kept it to a bare minimum. We haven't. The cloud has a bunch of functions with cloud X, cloud Y. I think that we just call import of an external storage object rather than having external storage import. We've kept the API quite minimum. We just have get, put, and
I know, but I'm not even sure. Given that we don't have the import and export, it's unclear to me that we need. Look, I suspect that we should have as generic functions upload, download. I mean, upload and download are very similar to copy file. In fact, it's completely unclear to me why we have anything other than copy file, except for the fact that it's not conceptually, it feels wrong to just have everything be copy file. Let's keep going with this and let's loop back to this. Are these things implemented yet? I mean, do we have?
We have a test pipelet locally.
Okay.
And we have tried this with Dropbox and IPFS.
Okay. But we also have separately an S3 link, which presumably will make it work with S3.
Right. Yeah, we are reviewing all those SDKs and everything that the bucket type services provide.
Okay. What happens if you want to list what's in a bucket?
If you scroll down to the external storage object, you will see something like that. Right, so if you go to scroll down a little bit more to buckets and just expand the
Okay, I don't have any idea why this isn't file names of external storage object.
Yeah, that should work too. So we were thinking about having, so the external storage object will have properties, right? So one of the properties will list the files, like in that case.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly nice. Files data set. It's kind of nice. I mean, arguably, this files data set, we should have the analog of file names able to do that. At the very least, there should be a function repository function that does that for a directory.
Oh, one that produces a data set of your files with all that information.
Yes. Length doesn't sound right. What is length?
The amount of files you have in the bucket.
Then it should say something like file count or something, not length.
Yeah.
Okay.
Length is very obscure.
But I wonder if file is the right word. I mean, the abstraction here is not really, we're kind of stretching it to call these things inside a bucket files, right?
Well, what are they usually called? What are they usually called in these services?
Am I wrong about that? Do they call the things inside bucket files, or is that not really the term?
Juan or Erasmo, do you know if they use a different name? I haven't heard another name.
They use files.
Okay.
All right, that should be called service name if it's just the string.
Okay.
Right? And service should extract the service object.
I see.
Okay. Creation date of the bucket. Import. Yeah, I agree. I mean, import should do. What does import do with a directory?
I'm not sure if that works. I can try.
I don't think it works. But arguably, and that would be a question for Shadi, import of a directory should do the same thing here.
Well, I want to try that, but I want to kill my machine and leave the live stream. So I'll try later.
Okay. Okay. So this concept of an external storage object. So I guess for a cloud object, what are the properties of a cloud object? Your typical, is there a URL property? There are various properties of cloud objects. Yes, no, maybe?
Yeah, try properties. I mean, see if this properties selector returns anything.
Doesn't seem to. This is not good. Oh boy. Look, this is a different thing. This doesn't have, oh, what a mess. This is using the information mechanism, right, which we hadn't discussed for cloud objects. I mean, for external storage objects. right? So if I do, okay, now I say that %75 sub MIME type.
It doesn't work.
If I say information %75 MIME type, then it does work. Humph. Well, we probably should make it work with subvalues. What do you think?
Yeah, I see no reason to not have it work with subvalues. Almost all the object things
does,
we're having.
Does URL work with subvalues? Because there's no reason you can't extract the URL path with a subvalue then. Or even file work with subvalues. I think if we're going to have it, they've all, well, okay, so let's look at that. We're getting them all to work with subvalues. Okay. But otherwise, for right now, we can have it work with information for the external storage object. Makes sense?
So with information and the properties as here, or just information?
I think so. No. I mean, information can give a whole bunch of properties, as it does for other things, right? So if I say information of %75, it'll give that whole info box thing, and that will be a very nice thing for it to give for the external storage object.
Right.
Okay. I like that very much, actually. So fine. So that's what we should do. Whether we subsequently decide to make everything be accessible with subvalues is an interesting question. But if we're going to do it, we should do it for all types of storage objects. Make sense?
Okay, I see. Yeah.
Let me ask you another question. Are we sure we want to call these external storage objects, not storage object?
So I'm trying to think about local object and what will be the difference if a local object is storing something.
Let's call it external storage.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just trying to think whether, I mean, it's just like a file. Well, we have the notion of a remote file versus a local file. So I agree, external storage object seems right. Okay. There are a bunch of questions here. Querying the external storage system for how much file space is remaining, for instance. In other words, these global things, that will be a service connect query, right?
Yeah. So we want to support all these services also to service connect. So you can do that kind of operations through the service connection.
So it would typically look like service execute of service object of I don't know,
right, user data or
file space remaining or something. So have we looked at standardizing those queries for the different services, or is it really hopeless and messy? Are we going to be able to have a common set of properties for across all those services?
That's what we tried. That's what we're trying to do all these years with the service connection. So we'll try to do it here, but I would say that we probably have some kind of a standard for the bucket type and for the file type services. Not sure if for all.
Well, okay, fine. But so long as we have I mean, it could be bucket space remaining and something else. But I mean, and no doubt IPFS will have funky exceptions, like it's infinite space and things like this, right? Okay, but so let's get a list of those properties and try and see whether we can get a common subset. All right. Other questions on the live stream. Is there any way to get a summary of how much data was written during a session? That's interesting. That's an interesting issue. So that will be an interesting issue. I mean, to record that in the service object, right? Do you understand the point that if you by accident wrote a terabyte you'd kind of like to know that before. I mean, in other words, the service object could show you how much data there was, and it could be a query of the service object, how much data had been written, in other words, the session, I don't know, session storage. What would it be called? Session, what would be the session storage size or something? I don't know. That's a good suggestion. I mean, we don't have that for files. It just does what it does. But I agree that since these things are specifically costing money by bytes, we might want that. By the way, don't forget to have units on the various byte sizes and things.
Right, but it isn't a similar case with cloud. Like people pay for cloud, and they also.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, we don't really record that. I don't know how. I mean, that's in the cloud logging data. Right, so it's a minor suggestion. I mean, you can clearly get the information from the service itself, but it would be good to have a standard query of the service object, which would give you this. Okay, nice to have a mechanism to limit the amount of data written to a storage device to prevent unexpected charges caused by program error. That's an interesting idea. So, I mean, that would be the analog of time constraint, arrow, whatever. I mean, we could imagine something external storage constraint, I suppose.
Yeah, but then you got to know to use it. It seems like it might be an option to service when you connect a service to say limit my uploads to, limit the bytes to.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure how you error out of that. It could be a bit messy to error out of it.
Write all except for that last byte and then fail. Right.
No, I understand that, but I'm just thinking about unwinding your program as it errors out. But I think you should look at that when you connect to the service, Christian. Let's look at whether you can specify a constraint at that stage.
Okay.
Yeah, because the only way you can write things to the service is through a file operation, right? Like an export, for example. And it's interesting. I mean, one could imagine even an export, and I don't know whether this makes any sense, but one could imagine having something like that. I don't know why one would care. That seems like the kind of thing we would have put in the 1980s and taken out sometime in the intervening period. Right, because that's the thing, I'm writing a file, but I don't want it to be too big.
Right.
Okay, Ali is asking, complaining about focus being less on the cloud and more on the desktop. We are doing lots of stuff on the desktop. Do not worry. Lots of things on the desktop. Okay, let's look at the let's look at these things at the bottom here. External storage submit.
Right. So we were thinking that all these functions you saw are for synchronous tasks, right? So we have stuff like I don't know, like URL download, submit, URL submit. But in this case, we should have something for uploading and downloading files, correct? I mean, we want both operations to have a synchronous version.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for download and upload, but the other things, I mean, doesn't make a lot of sense. Anything that returns, right, those things. So, I mean, okay, so this is the asynchronous case. I mean, I would think that that will force us to have a download and an upload function, because I don't think we want to have I mean, I have to believe. I mean, right now we have data bin upload, right? That is for uploading a whole data bin. By the way, a question that was asked much earlier in this discussion was about the resource system and its relationship to these things. So let's address that question for a second. I believe, although nobody is here from the resource system team, but I believe that the resource system would have no trouble referring to an external storage object. Is that also what other people here believe?
So basically using a resource object as an argument and save that to external storage.
No. I mean that when you deploy something to the resource system, okay, which you don't do, you have to. I mean that's a thing. Let's see, how does this work? Let me just look. Resource submit. Now that's for submitting to a proper repository. How do you do this? I am confused for a moment here. How do you do that? How do you upload? Do you just cloud deploy of a resource object? I think you do. Right? Oh yeah, cloud publish of a resource object. Right, that provides. That's not encouraging. Whoever's PMing here, please make a note of that. Go get it tracked down.
Okay.
Growl. Okay, but I believe that what we can do there is what we're saying is, if you say resource object and you say cloud publish of the resource object. Okay, here's a question for external storage. How does it work with a CDN? Because we have a quite separate, two questions. The for the Wolfram application server, anybody here? Todd knows about that. Do you know about that? That's an Andrew project, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I do. What's the question about that, though?
So the upload mechanism. So in Wolfram application server, when you deploy an API, you are uploading assets into the server, right?
Right.
Actually, you're uploading it into the container because how does that work? It gets cloned because the container can be cloned, right? So I don't completely know how that works. But fundamentally, you're uploading assets that become the files called by the web server when you go to that URL, right?
Right.
And how does that upload work? What is that upload? Do you know?
I don't know what you mean. How does it work? I mean,
No, I mean, what's the function that causes you? I think we were talking about having a service execute that does that upload.
I doubt that they have created that yet.
Okay, so I would speculate that we should have an external storage system. What about external storage and the Wolfram? Okay, so storage cases. Okay, other cases. So I claim one case is Wolfram application server. And I claim another case is a CDN. Okay, like when we upload stuff to our CDN, do you have any idea how that works? I have no idea. I assume there's an API that does it. Anybody here know how that works?
Nope.
I mean,
okay.
Anything that has an API, I think, could be plugged into this system.
No, I know. The question is whether what you deliver at the other end is, because the thing about a CDN, yeah, I think it's the same story. I think a CDN is a good example of an external storage area. I think both of those cases are, which means that we should be able to have these same functions for both of those. Okay, so the issue is upload, submit, download, submit. These are fire and forget functions. As in, you say, go ahead and download. You're not going to look at that file yet. It's just going to happen somewhere in the background. And eventually you can have a callback that tells you it's ready. Is that right? But I kind of think that this is a great example of why we should genericize download and upload. Okay, I also think that in the case of this data bin thing, that fundamentally it should be upload, and then there should be a symbolic data bin specifier, and then the payload. That makes sense? Right, so in other words, that becomes purely upload to a data bin of the payload. Right? Yes? Anybody understanding?
Yeah.
Okay. So my question is, there is no cloud upload. Right now it's copy file to the cloud, right?
Right.
Right.
So I think we should have, just as a convenience, an upload and a download function that works to the cloud, because we can then have upload, the equivalent of cloud upload submit, which seems like a useful function, right? And those are the building blocks for the sync system, the synchronization system, right?
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
Okay.
Also, so now that you were talking about the resource object, so just to make a note about what you said about the external storage object, that if you put, let's say, an address on IPFS that doesn't exist, the resource object doesn't know that. But if you try right now, I mean the external storage object, but if you try resource object and do something like hello, that returns an error. So that behavior is different.
So I think it's only returning. I predict that it's only doing that if its structure is wrong. I think if I were to pick this up here, and feed that into that resource object, I predict it is not going to error out. Oops. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, the resource system does go, it's active. You type resource object, it goes and does something.
Okay. And what's wrong with that? I mean, because the resource system has the feature that it is caching locally, always, right? Which has nothing to do with an external storage object. I mean, that's the difference. That's why resource objects exist and aren't just cloud objects, for example. They have a lot of other management features. Right?
Right. External storage object would be like cloud object in your proposal, that you can type it and nothing happens until you try to use it somehow. And then
yes,
it might have
exactly.
to.
All right. So
no arguments.
My conclusion here is that we should attempt to not have external storage put and get, that we should just have
I thought you concluded that we do want external storage put and get.
I recanted because of the fact that we've got upload and download and we just don't want to multiply those functions. The only thing that we lose is not having to type. There's a tiny bit of extra typing to do with saying put blah, 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 comma, external storage object of no arguments. I think that's a corner case. I think the number of people who want to put anonymous stuff into external storage is not large. It's much smaller than the number of people who want to put anonymous stuff into the cloud, which is a very common thing to want to do. I think we should attempt to do this without having an external storage put. Okay, but I think we should introduce download and upload, and I think we should introduce those to be the equivalent of copy file for cases where they can be. Okay. And then I think we should have upload and download submit and have those work with the cloud. And I think we should get rid of data bin upload. We should deprecate that and replace that by upload to data bin. Make sense?
Okay.
Yeah, I wonder whether on just a generic upload function and download won't hit some case where we
it may.
Can't work the same across all.
It may. I don't see it right now, but it might. I mean, the main issue is with anonymous things, because if it isn't anonymous, it's kind of okay. Right? And I think, another thing you can imagine is an upload to a service, right? Where all you give is the service object. And it somehow creates the, so long as all these things return their final location, that's okay, right? Okay, let's do one last look here at what we've got here. So we've got a dollar external storage base, which is the default thing that is from a service connect, returning a service object. External storage base is an option. That's kind of stupid, actually, because it's an option to one function, namely external storage object. Well, it's okay. It's similar to blockchain base and so on. You usually set dollar blockchain base.
Yes, but I think the analog case will be the blockchain transaction, where we don't have a blockchain-based option, but it's a property of the transaction.
That's because you've already got blockchain objects in the transaction, right? Which know their blockchain base.
Right, you need to keep that there.
So what is the thing? Blockchain transaction submit, for example?
No. Well, yeah, if you go to blockchain transaction submit, you will see the whole example going from creating a transaction to submitting a transaction.
Okay, but this has a blockchain transaction which contains a blockchain base. But I assume that if I were to put this as a symbol outside the association here, that it would also work and canonicalize to being inside the association. Is that true? Just like if I'd set dollar blockchain base, that would find its way into the association, correct? If it doesn't work that way, it should.
Yeah, I think we talked about this, and maybe it should work. But I'll check.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah, but the idea behind this is that the blockchain transaction object needs this property, so that's why we don't have it as an option. So
I understand.
I think that's the same idea with the external storage object.
Let me explain. Let me understand that a little bit more carefully. So you're saying, why is it not an argument to the external storage object? Why is the service not an argument to the external storage object?
Because if you lose that piece of information, you can't connect again. So if you want to send a whole external storage object, you need to have that property inside and not that as an option.
Well, how does remote file work? Remote file has to know, let me look at remote file. On a remote machine, I see. So that's got in the URI, that's got the specification of the remote machine, right? Because it's using the SCP protocol or something like that. Right?
Right.
Okay. And there's no base in the URI for an external storage object. There's no like AWS S3 : base or something, is there? From which you can deduce what you're talking about. or is there?
No. So we discussed about it.
Doesn't IPFS have a base? Doesn't it have URIs?
It has addresses that I don't know if they're.
No, but I understand. But doesn't it have a transport specification? Isn't it like IPFS : blah blah blah? So in other words, what I'm trying to understand is from the URI, can you deduce the service type?
Do you know that? Sorry. No, Juan, do you know that about IPFS?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, so can you reference something in IPFS with, so how to call it? Like, as you see here in remote file, that you have SCP and the path of the file.
The question is whether these services have URIs that specify the service in the URI.
Not really, at least not for the case of Amazon, or neither for.
What does it look like? What does a path on Amazon look like?
Well, they have a path for their APIs for URIs, and they use URI parameters. For example, Amazon uses the bucket ID and the file ID, and IPFS uses.
Okay, what is the prefix? What is the transport protocol prefix for their URIs? Like HTTP. What's the analog of HTTP? What do they use? What is the transport protocol that they're using?
They use HTTPS.
Oh, really? Okay. All right, fine. Okay, all right. Well, I guess this is right. I still want to look at this one more time, but why don't you go ahead and implement it this way?
Okay.
Okay, question is on our live stream. Complaint from Gustavo. For download, submit, and URL submit, one gets into trouble if one submits too many. An option to limit the number of simultaneous connections would be very useful. Not sure we have the right set of people here to address that. Todd, do you know anything about that?
Well, I understand the question. I thought that we had some limit of like 6 threads or something. I mean, I guess the issue is that the other service can complain and reject these downloads or uploads because you're trying to.
Why don't we look into this? Why don't you take that issue, Carla? Why don't you take that issue and ask Fahim what the story is with it?
Okay.
Yeah, Carla, you can talk to me to clarify that in the future if you need.
Okay, next question. Will one be able to use set directory to an external storage location? Yeah, I was wondering that myself. In other words, I think the answer to that is it's kind of hopeless.
That will operate on what? On the, like if you have two connections to Dropbox, let's say, you'll have to use set directory on the service object. I'm not sure.
I'm sorry. So if you say the issue is, could you do a set directory to a bucket location or something, and then be referring to files sort of with wild abandon with just their file names? It seems challenging to me to do that. In other words, the issue would be, whether you can do, the proposition would be set directory to an external storage object. I don't think that can be.
Isn't it to the service? Isn't the service the argument?
No, because you're going inside the service, right? You're looking at a particular bucket inside that service. Right? It's somewhat more complicated because the poorly named directories, right? That directory, right, has The question is, what's the analog of that directory? Right? Could you set that directory to be? I think this is hopeless. I mean, I think it's like saying set it to be a remote file. I think it just gets deeply tangled. I would say the answer is no, not for the time being. Any comments, Todd? Do you understand the issue? I mean, it looks hopeless to me.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think I can imagine if, say, Dropbox supports a notion in their API of setting the current directory for future operations on this connection, then I can imagine we could support it. But I doubt they do, and it's certainly not going to be generic across connections.
Well, let's find out whether they do.
But also using set directory on the external storage object, I don't think it makes like too much sense, because that object is representing is the representation of a remote file, and you are setting.
Well, I mean, the thing one could do, which is a little bit funky, is set directory could return a modified external storage object, which contains in it somewhere a setting for current directory. See what I'm saying? I mean, right now, set directory is a pure side effect operation. It does not affect its argument. But we could return, well, actually, no. What it returns is the directory you went to, right? Which is, in a sense, comes from nowhere, because it's a pure side effecty thing. In this case, we could be synthesizing a representation of the directory you go to.
Right, but then how do you use that? How do you use that thing? If it has no side effect in the system.
It hasn't written it back. Yeah, okay. All right. So then it would have to modify. It would have to. Yeah, that would have to write itself back to. Yeah, that would have to. Would have to write back to the service object. For that,
it seems like a lot of work just to avoid having to put full path names all the time.
Right. Well, let's explore that later. Okay. I think that's not for right now. Okay. Anything else we should figure out here? Other than terrific project and I think a thing that I would like to comment on, and please communicate with Brad about this, about the system servers business, because I could imagine people who want to set up a resource system like a data repository on S3, for example. And I think this plumbing should allow that to work. Am I making sense?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, right now, well, maybe not. The question is, what's the analog of cloud deploy or cloud put? See, cloud put. No, actually, it should work. It should work. So long as you can get into the resource object and tell it that the storage location, that the location of the resource is in S3, then it should just work, I believe. Right now, if you do a cloud deploy of a resource object, it will make sure to package everything up for the cloud. The analog of that here is less clear. See what I'm saying? I mean, this is a weird case, right? So you could imagine something like an external storage deploy. I don't really understand this yet. Okay, where basically what you're doing is to say, oh, yeah. I know what this is. This is the analog of service deploy. Remember service deploy? Which I think we still haven't implemented a case of, but you remember what this is? This is what mail receiver function deployment should be. What service deploy does is it takes some active service that you are trying to define and it posts it into an external way to deliver services. Okay? So for example, let's imagine that, well, like an Alexa skill would be an example of one of these, right?
Right. That's what I use in my mind whenever you talk about this function.
Right. So, I mean, it's something that is kind of complicated, and it requires that you've packaged up a specification, a symbolic specification of an external service that you can then, and then what this then does is it posts that external service. It hooks that external service into the what would you call it? Into the sort of deployment area for the external service. So, as an Alexa skill, a bot that is being, I don't know, a Slack bot or something, same type of thing, right? So, I mean, examples being Alexa skill, Slack bot, ... But I think here, am I completely confused? That you could imagine a service deploy to S3 effectively of a resource object, I claim. Am I completely confused?
But why would this be different than upload of the resource object to S3? I mean, what's the deploy? I mean, in cloud deploy, you're doing things to this object, like an API function or something. You have to package up in a special way.
Yeah,
but these external storages, you're just blasting them into the external storage system.
No, I understand. The issue is the hooking. Okay, so what it really is, what you're really doing is deploying it into essentially an S3 resource system. Because the issue is, just like you have to hook into Slack to say, access my Slack bot in this way, right? If you want that resource to be accessible from the resource system that you have set up, it's got to be hooked into the resource system. Okay, I don't fully understand this yet. Coming later. All right, anything else to talk about here?
Nope, we have a lot to process. Yeah.
Great, looks very nice. Thank you all, and thanks to folks on the live stream. That was a very useful set of comments, much appreciated. See you all soon.